9x19 cartridge. And we're going to look at a couple of different methods and a few different pieces of equipment that this can be done with. And we're going to look at how easy it is to actually do and the proper method of starting from scratch and working our way to the finished product. So to reload, we need a few components to start with. The first thing we need is a set of dies. So I'm going to look and find my 9mm dies here. And here's my 9mm Luger dies. Now when you get a die set, if you're not familiar with it, it's going to come with some instructions that has some load data in it, and you're going to have 3 or 4 dies depending on the type of set you bought. And you're also going to have a little scooper here. This is a powder measurer, so you can measure your powder by volume, because there's 2 different ways to measure your powder, and that's by volume in cubic centimeters or by grains, and that's the weight of it. And it also will come with a bullet seat there. Now, here's a little primer pocket cleaner. So we need that. We need some 9mm cases. The first step to reloading these is we have to take the cartridge and deprime the cartridge. Every cartridge or case, if you will, that's once fired will generally have a spent primer in it, and we have to remove that primer to be able to reload this case. The way that we remove it is with the use of our decapping or depriming die. This die resizes the bullet because the inner walls of the die are the correct diameter and shape of what the bullet should be, what the case should be. And then we have the punch here, right, or the decapping pin. And this pin comes in from the inside and goes through. There's a flash hole in the center case, a hole in the case. Goes through and punches the primer out of it. Then as the case goes up in it, it also resizes the case. Alright, so to do that, we simply start our die in. And with our die, we also have our bullet seat. The bullet seat here, I'm using number 19 of a Lee set. So this bullet seat fits my 9mm perfect. That's what it's for, the 9mm. So I place it here and I simply run it all the way to the full stroke of the handle there. I run it to the full stroke of the handle. Then I work my die down. By working my die down, I'm reducing the danger of me damaging this case or my die. So I work it down until it starts making contact and I see it start pushing my handle up. Then I push a little bit more. And I continue to do this until I hear and see the primer being punched out of this case. Okay. Feels like it's almost there. Gonna have to go down a little more. There we go. And there it went. So now it's decapped or deprimed. Right. At this point, I have a couple of options. A lot of people like to clean their brass, and that's always a good idea. You know, when you have time, you definitely want to clean your brass. And there's a few different ways to do this. This is a vibratory bowl. This is one of the things you can use to clean your brass. This item works pretty good. You can also use tumblers. You can also use sonic cleaners. There's a lot of different methods for this. But using one of these or something else, and it's still a good idea to clean out the interior walls of the case and to clean out also the primer pocket. And you need a little brush or something to brush down on the inside to clean that out pretty good. It's always a good idea to clean them if you can. And then there are some tools that help in cleaning the primer pocket. And here we see one of them. This is a Lee tool. And this tool will clean large and small primer pockets. On this side I have put it in and I simply spin it around as such. Clean it out really good. And my pocket. So now if we've got our case clean, let's say we cleaned it, whatever method you decide to use, maybe you're just cleaning the pockets and the inside walls. The next step, once we've cleaned it, is we want to use our reloading manual at this point. And this is one of my favorites, is the Lee Modern Reload, and it works pretty good because it's so thick, it has so many different calibers in it, and that's one of the things I like about it. But you can also find load data a little bit of everywhere, and it's not a good idea to guess at what you're going to reload with. Is I find the 9mm Luger section here, and I look at the specs. For the bullet itself, and I look at the overall length of the case and the width of it. And when I look at the overall length of the case and the width of it, that's when I use my set of calipers. And on this set of calipers, I simply take my case Then I decide whether it falls in specifications or not. Now, if it doesn't fall within specs, if it's a little bit too long, because cases do tend to stretch. They do tend to stretch. So if it's a little too long, there are a lot of different trimmers on the market, but I'm going to go back to this little handy tool here. Because if you open it up, then what you've got on the inside is a case trimmer. Got a lot of little attachments for it. It's a handy little tool. And I like to use this all the time anyway, whether I need to trim my cases or not, because you don't necessarily have to trim the length with this tool here. This tool will also just deburr it too, because that's one of the things about your cases. You want to make sure that there's no burrs, anything that your bullet can get caught on or it can snag on in your magazine or in your pistol or rifle as it feeds. And here you got this side that's good for the outer wall of the case. So here you simply do it here. And there are power tools that do this too. There are power tools. And then you can do the interior of the case. And once you got it nice and smooth, the way that you want it, you're ready to go to the next step. The next step is priming. And priming can be done a few different ways. Like here we see the Lee turret press. And on this press, it has a primer punch also, and this is removable. So with this press, I can prime as I go, the same as with the Lee single stage that we just saw, and that's the way that we're going to use. But you also have hand primers. And hand primers are a pretty handy little device. You put your primers, you have a small and a large, because you have 4 different types of primers. Your small pistol, large pistol, small rifle, large rifle. And then you have the magnum variations of those. So always make sure you're using the correct primers when you're putting a primer in, and that data will be in the load manual. But this is just an alternative method. What it does here is feeds the bullets into here, and I put a bullet seat on top of it like we see here, and I press the handle down, and a punch comes up and seats the primer. So this can prime pretty quickly. If you want to prime your cases before you start reloading them, then this is a pretty good method for it. So I'm going to prime the one case that we had right here. So I'm going back to the Lee single stage. Now here on the Lee single stage, to prime this, I have to seat my primer punch, and then I have to use a primer. I'm going to use a standard small pistol primer here. I always place the primer smooth side out, or smooth side down in this case, here. And then with this type of press, an upstroke till I feel it sit. Once you feel it bottoming out pretty good, then that's when you've applied enough pressure. You don't want to seat the primer too deep, or else the firing pin won't hit it. You don't want to seat it too far out, or else it could go off, unexpectedly. You want to get it pretty much flush or slightly on the interior side. Here, this one's just about flush. It looks really good. That one's seated really well. So now we're ready to put a charge in it. Next, we're going to look at several devices. The first type that we see here is a Lee powder dispenser. This is mounted on the table. There are different brands. I happen to have a lot of Lee. And this brand right here, this allows you to mount this device to the table. And what you see here is a chamber. When this chamber is down, it's on this rotary handle right here, as we can see, this rotary handle. When this chamber is down, gravity allows, or dispenses powder into this tube or magazine. Now, as soon as we turn this dial changes the amount of powder that we dispense from this tube. So this is adjustable, and to charge it, you simply rotate the handle down like that, so gravity will force the powder into there, and then you rotate the chamber up, and it will dump your powder. And as you can see, I was a little messy there. We want to be more careful. Normally, you would have your cartridge there with a funnel, or either place your cartridge here. So that's one method. Another method of dispensing powder into it is if you use the volume method. These do come with these powder dippers, as they call them, and this allows you to dip powder at the appropriate amount. Each one will be stamped by the volume of powder that it holds. So this is also another method. A lot of people like that method. Then you have the powder dispenser, another one that will go onto your press itself. This is called the auto disc one. It has this disc in here, and this disc has holes in it. You fill the top part with powder. What happens is when the case pushes up on this, it moves the auto disc forward, and when it moves it forward, it dumps the powder through this hole down through here into your case on the press. One of these methods is going to be really good because you can get a lot done in a reasonable amount of time. Now, if you're going to be loading a lot, then we probably should be using a progressive press. I have a Loadmaster also, and I have a Dillon, and I like those both a lot, and we're going to look at those later, but here is just the one. So here, that's another method. Then you always have the method of weighing it out using a digital scale. Weigh it out by grains, you get a scale, you find something that you zero out, and then you choose your powder. The powder that I'm going to be using today is called Type Group. It's a good powder for a lot of different pistol loads. Some people like it, some people don't. And it's a fast powder, so it's a pretty fast powder, and I've had good results with it. It's not the absolute best, but it's pretty good. So what we do here is we simply zero out our scale by placing our known item on the scale here, and we zero it out by hitting, you'll have a button on it that says tare. So after determining in my load book for this particular load of 9mm, my 115 grain bullet, round nose, copper jacketed, I'm going to use 4.5 grains of Type Group, which is the max load recommended for this particular one. So make sure my scale is zeroed out. And once my scale is zeroed out, I can use, whatever I like to simply measure out my powder from there. And here we go. Sometimes you have to take a little bit out of it and get it just right. And now I have my charge weighed out perfectly. And I like doing it by the scale or using one of the tabletop mounts because it seems to be extremely consistent that way. When I'm loading my rifles, every round I load will be weighed on the digital scale so that I can ensure every one of my rifle bullets, especially my 35 Remington, that every one is exactly the same or as close as it can possibly be. So now I've got my charge taken care of, and we've already got our bullet case. Our bullet case has been primed. So basically now we're ready to charge this. Now the round is charged. Now normally this is a step that you can put, like in this case, this is a turret press here that we see, and this could have 4 different stages on it. So that gives me the ability to do 4 different things, at once with one pull of the handle. So loading your powder and doing this whole process on one of these is much easier. Now on the hand press, the single stage, of course, you get the feel for every bullet, so you might tend to get a little more accuracy out of it, or I do anyway. So now that I'm ready, all I've got left to do now is seat and crimp my bullet. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove sizing and deprime die. I'm going to leave my bullet seat there, but I'm going to remove my primer punch. So now I've got the round charge. I'm ready to seat the bullet and crimp it. So I'll place the round in, and I get my factory, this is my factory crimp and bullet seat die. So this is 9mm. And I'm going to put this in, and you leave it way up too. And what I do with this is I go ahead and seat the bullet. In this case, we'll see 115 grain round nose. It's a nice looking bullet. I'm going to seat it here. I'm going to run this down. Not too far, because you don't want to go too far. So now I feel it making contact, so I'm going to back off a little bit. Feel it making contact. I don't want to push too much at the beginning. There we go. So I'm barely seating it here. As when I come back down, we should be able to see that it's barely sitting in there. So it's barely sitting in there, but it's sitting in there pretty good. So now I'm going to come back down 1/2 a turn. And I'm going to come up. And I feel a little more pressure. You start feeling the bullet seat into the case. Come back down. I can look at this bullet and tell that it's a little long. This is the stage to where you want to make sure that you get the exact measurements that you want. Once again, when you get used to reloading for your own pistols, your own rifles and such, then you'll learn what your rifle and what your pistol likes. But as far as starting out or just going by the book, then I'm going to look and make sure by the specifications in the book, and I look at what's called the COAL, or cartridge overall length. So the minimum length, using 4.5 grains of Type Group, 1.125 inches. So I set my calipers to 0, I zero them out, and I simply measure the case. And to measure the case, I'm just going to put it in right there and make sure I get a good accurate measurement. And probably can't hardly see the readout on the camera, but I'm a little long right now, so I need to seat it a little further. So I'm going to put it back in, and I'm going to go another half turn. I seated it a little more, and this is the part where I want to take my time and make sure. So now I'm going to check it again, and it's still a little long. So here, this is the part of the process you just go 1/2 or 1/4 of a turn and repeat. Once you repeat, you measure. Alright, measuring, I'm about there. I'm almost there with this particular round. So here, I'm going to go one more half turn. And I think that should have got it there. And it is one hair, just a hair too short. Too long. So I'm going to have to back off a little bit. Give my half a turn. And that should do it. That may have been a little too deep, but let's measure, and no. That is right on the money. So that one's right on the money, and your bullet should look very good. In this case, we can see that, this was a case that we deprimed ourselves and we did not clean. So it's not real nice and shiny like something you see that came out of the store. But if you clean it and polish it by using stainless steel media or the corn media, that works pretty good, but the stainless steel is really, really good. In a tumbler or a vibratory bowl of some type, then it gets some sparkling clean. And, they look brand new at that point, but looks don't matter. Now this is, next step is optional. You don't necessarily have to crimp your pistol rounds. I like to, because I feel like it makes my bullets feed a little better is when I crimp them. And to crimp them, what I do is, once I seat all my bullets, I get the best crimp by taking my seat out, and then I can lower the crimp part of the die. And it smooths out that top ledge a little bit. Yeah, that went in a little bit. Let's go some more. And there we go. Almost. Just a little bit more. Let's come back out with that. And there we go. And that feels pretty good. That feels pretty good. You can notice how it got a little cleaner around that edge. How it's a little shinier, if you can tell. It's because it crimped it down a little. That gives it a little more explosive power coming out. I tend to get some better velocities when I put a good crimp on there, and I get less misfires and stuff like that. But this is a pretty solid load bullet, and as you can see, the process to load one takes a little while, but it's well worth it, because I know for a fact that this bullet is loaded exactly the way I want it. Reloading ammunition is a valuable hobby. It can save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and it can also save you and give you better accuracy and better results and performance out of your ammunition. So depending on the volume that you want to do reloading, you're going to save money, you're going to get better accuracy, and pretty fun hobby. This load here was produced with 4.5 grains of tight group. The volume on that would be 0.38 cubic centimeters. And if you're using an auto disc, it's the 0.37 auto disc. The velocity for this particular bullet should be, although I said 1300 earlier, it should be around 1150 for this particular bullet. And the minimum overall length of this cartridge should be 1.125 centimeters. Going to have some more videos out on different calibers, but also going to try to shorten them a little bit and look at specific loads that perform very well that I've tested out. Hope you enjoyed it, and for now, Serious Survivor out.